Yeah, welcome to the show, guys. Today we've got another live show coming for you, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this. I'm going to be giving away my free, well, it's never been free before, but today I'm going to give you exactly what you see right there, the Photographer's Wedding Guide, quick reference guide to photography, 30-minute prep. That's what we're talking about today. Friends, I hope you're having a good time. I want to share with you this 30-minute guide to how to get ready for your wedding if you got one coming up. And as usual, this is going to be a live stream, so that means that if you got any questions or comments, I'll be checking them periodically throughout. I expect this stream to take about 30 minutes. As you know, it's middle of the spring, summer season for me. Wedding season is full blast, so it's easier for me to bring this kind of content to you via live stream rather than trying to make a full video. What we're talking about today is my actual photographer's reference guide that you see right here. We're going to talk about what it is, what it's used for, how it can help you. It's really designed to keep an experienced photographer on track, just in case you need an extra push to get you over, to get your consistency there. And it's also made for brand new photographers that don't really know much about photography, but are interested in getting into wedding photography. This is a great place to start. As always, anything that I talk about here, this information really has nothing more to do than just how I do it until you can do it better, okay? So that's what it comes down to. If you don't have a place to start, this is a great place to begin until you develop your own place. Now, I want you to go ahead and download this from the link provided in the description down below. I don't know how long we'll keep this up and available, but as long as the link is there and it's operating, you can download it for absolutely free. I had hesitated on giving this away or even selling it. People have asked me for these all the time, and I've got them for the different parts of my business. And while you guys are downloading that real quick on your phone so that you can watch this with me, I'll talk about that for a second. I got to let you know, I bring this to you all from a position of wishing to help you directly in your photography business. That's what it comes down to. I hope that this will help you make money. And I'm going to share with you how it can, because it will allow you to stay consistent and also talk about the things, everything from posing guides and suggestions to my shot list on the back. We're going to talk about the whole thing, the whole ball of wax, and how I put together a timeline. It's all here. Now, the reason I hesitate to give it away or even sell it is because I feel very strongly that if you're not capable or have not put the thought into creating your own timeline, right, then you probably aren't ready to photograph a wedding. A wedding is a serious event, okay? It's not for the faint of heart. You're on your feet all day long. You're working a lot with the bride and groom. So this comes with the caveat of I normally wouldn't give this to anyone, not because the information's secret, although it does have stuff that I do specifically to get the type of shots that I do. I normally wouldn't give it to them because it'd be like giving away the keys to the castle without someone appreciating what those keys meant, right? So you don't realize how important it is because you didn't do the work to get there. This is the culmination of 13 years of wedding photography. And for me, it has been condensed down to a front and back of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that anybody can look at and have an idea about how to photograph a wedding appropriately. So that's where it comes to. So I hope you got it downloaded. Let's go ahead and kick into this. Let's get it started. Once again, we're going to be taking some comments as they go through. I'll check the comment board from time to time as it pops up just to see where we are. Okay. That being said, so what do we have here? It doesn't matter if you're a photographer and you're using a $2,000 or $3,000 camera body, or even if you're just doing something on a little retro, Instax camera. You could photograph a wedding on whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Whatever medium you work with is the one that we're talking about. Here, today, we're going to talk about how to get consistently good shots so that you can have something that's deliverable. So before we even jump into this, let's talk about what it means to be a photographer. If you're going to photograph somebody's wedding, you got to be on it, man. You got to be ready and able to command the area when it's time to take charge, and you have to be able to fall back into the shadows, so to speak, in order to photograph without being seen when that's time as well. Realistically, if you ask me, the most important vendor at a bride's wedding is the photographer. Why? Is it because I'm a photographer? No, that's not it. Well, maybe it is a little bit it. But the other reason is because you only see the cake once if you're lucky, maybe the topper a year later. You're only going to eat the food once, definitely if you're lucky. You don't want that coming back up or there was a problem. The DJ doesn't give you a mixtape of the event unless you are dealing with Chris West Entertainment. If you book Chris West, we'll definitely give you a mixtape at the end, an old school mixtape with an Instax wide print on the front of that cassette tape of you at your wedding. It's really cool. But generally, most DJs don't even provide any service like that. And then So what's left? The venue? What are you going to do? Drive back by a year later? So the photographer is the only one at the wedding that will create memories that last. Realistically, you are the rock star. If you're the wedding photographer, you are there as an historian. You are going to preserve someone's wedding for the posterity of their family to come. Even if that family breaks, you will preserve the wedding for the children, the progeny of your bride and groom. That's a huge thing. So maybe grandson or something or son can remember a time when everything was great and happy, if the sad part happens. And if the big part happens and they stay together, then you are chronicling a life that began before mom and dad were married, right there at I do. So son and daughter can look back and say, wow, it is a gigantic job. So that's why I generally don't like to give this away, because most people, if you haven't thought about it in those terms, then you might not be approaching it with the reverence that it deserves. Once you do, it's really about organization. Now, I have these sheets for everything that we do: photography, videography, and DJ. And depending on how well this video does, and if you guys like it, I'll do a PRG or a DRG or a VRG for each and every one of those. Now, as we're continuing right here, we're going to look at this and we're going to talk a little bit more about what those things are important for. But before we get into it, I do want to say this. Although this is free and everything, if you find any of this information helpful, please use those links down below. It'd be real simple for you to go ahead and hit that Amazon or PayPal link. Send me a cup of coffee if you think that it's something that you're worth doing that, if I helped you out. Or if you'd like to go ahead and support the channel by purchasing your camera or your next gear, use one of those Amazon links, those affiliate links down below, and I'll get a couple of pennies off of whatever you purchase, even if it's dishwasher detergent. Okay, plug done. Let's talk about the front. The guide is designed to be printed on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I have provided it to you in a PDF format. It is best opened in Adobe Acrobat DC if you have it. If you don't, you could open it in Photoshop or GIMP or something else. And the logo is designed in a spot where you could very easily put your logo there if you wish. Doesn't bother me. And you can do it on the front. It's on both pages. Okay? The sheet is also designed to be able to be two separate pages. So there is some repeated information from the front to the information on the inside right here. That depends on how you wish to use this sheet. Sometimes I simply send the front copy of this to my bride and groom so that they'll understand the shot list that I'll take and have them select the different shots that they like. We'll talk about the shot list in the next part of this. Right now, let's actually talk about the organization. On the front of the sheet, when it's folded, it's really designed to be printed on some stiff cardstock. That would work best for you. That way you can put it in a back pocket and then write on it throughout the day. And then you have a working document that at the end of the night, the bride signs. She just puts her little signature on there. On the front, it's going to who's photographing, what's the date, what's the location, and then it's got your camera, your lens, your flash, 2 sections for those, and then a notes section. This is able to help you get organized on the front, remember what it is that you're taking, and that you did a check that you took it. This is also good for your due diligence should you ever get into a legal battle or something like that. This has not really been the case for me, but checking your list, making a list and checking it twice like Santa, it's very, very helpful. Okay, now as we continue, when we look on the opposite side of it, we have 2 parts: camera configuration, shooting instructions, and then I guess part 3, image composition. These are pretty self-explanatory, right? And remember, when I start talking about these, they are designed from the aspect of there's a new photographer that's photographing. And that photographer, we want to be able to help them get up and running quickly. So if you understand how to shoot manual very well on your camera, I would always suggest that you shoot manual in the best situations that you can. If you need to work quickly and put it into aperture priority, that would be my next suggestion. The reason I would suggest aperture priority before shutter priority in most situations is because we're portrait photographers and we do attempt to blur the background in most situations. So aperture priority will allow you to do that by setting the aperture, and that camera will take care of the rest. With that being a consideration, sometimes there's not enough light, specifically indoors, where shooting in aperture priority may lead to a dragged shutter that's too long. In those cases, I would suggest shooting in shutter priority. And the reason is quite simple. If you're in a situation where the camera would begin dragging the shutter, well, if you set the shutter priority, it will most likely use the largest aperture that the camera has available in the first place. Now, the reason that that's important is because I've developed several different camera configuration methods that I like to share with my photographers and keep this with them in case they have a complete brain fart moment where something doesn't go right. Now, all of my photographers that work with me, they're trained. We've been working together for years. This is great when I help train new photographers. We picked up a new photographer last year. This was very helpful for her, and we're continuing on. And this is something that I use whenever any of us go out. We always have the photographer reference guide for each one of us, depending on what we're doing, and then we go check off our own parts on that on the backside. But we're getting to it. So the first part is about your camera configurations. We're going to talk about the camera menu setup. Whenever you shoot, it's going to remind you that when you turn it on, you're going to configure your date, your time, so that all your cameras match the same date and time, and that you're shooting with two things, RAW and fine or large JPEGs. Now, why would I do fine or large JPEGs? Mainly, it's because when I photograph, I'm actually backing up. I've got two huge cards in here, and I'm actually backing up to the JPEG card, a fine or large, 13 megabyte JPEG. I'm backing up all of the JPEGs for the entire year to that card. So it's like a 512 gigabyte card. And if I have to switch it out, I will. But at the end of the year, I've got the card that's got all of the JPEGs on it as one archive, right? It stays in the camera consistently. It never goes. The raw card number one in this instance, will sit there and take all of the raw files. So I may have to dump that card more often. This is just one way that I keep several different kinds of backups that I know I've always got an image to go back to. There's a conversation to be had about if JPEGs are as good as RAWs. Obviously, for editing, they're not. I'm not going to make that. But if for some reason you lost your card, you lost your this, you lost your that, having JPEGs back up on a card that's in your camera, just in another location for your entire year of photography, doesn't hurt anybody. Okay, and I also talk about setting the white balance either to auto or 5800 Kelvin. Usually auto is what I do because we're shooting raw and white balance doesn't really matter, but 5800 Kelvin allows it to synchronize with flash very easily, 56, 5800 depending on your flash. Now, outdoor configuration settings, bright light, like midday or early morning, afternoon, midday. Outdoor configurations at golden hour. And then indoor configurations for some other things. And these are very important. When we're outside in bright light and midday, we're using aperture priority. Set the camera to f2.8 on your aperture or wider if you have it, usually f2.8. Set your exposure compensation to 0 because you're using an aperture priority. If I didn't say that, set it to aperture priority. And then select ISO as in auto ISO or ISO 100. So there's a couple things that are happening right here too. When we're in that situation, what are we trying to do in bright midday light? That's usually harsh light. Let's think about that for a minute. And it's not very flattering. So if we're in a very, very bright situation, we need to use the lowest ISO possible. And we need to also, for photographing people, make sure that we're above 1/250th so that we don't get any movement when they're going. Really, 1/125th is fine. That means that if we're at f2.8 and we're not using any ND filters and we set our ISO to 100, then it will automatically take the longest shutter speed that it needs in order to photograph appropriately. If we're shooting away from the sun, meaning the sun's behind us, then it's going to be a very fast shutter speed, 1/2000, 4000, 8000. If we're shooting into the sun, it could also be very fast, depending on how the camera's metering. If it's metering center weighted and it's trying to expose for your center weighted meter, that means that maybe it's trying to make that backlit person who looks like a shadow bright, which means it's going to give you a very slow shutter speed. If it's matrix metering or multi-metering, then it's metering the whole scene, and it will likely continue to give you a very quick shutter speed. But if you're somewhere in between, setting your ISO to ISO auto will allow the camera to bump the ISO up a little bit in the situations where you may be moved into shadow or where clouds come over and cause a bit of shadow, which can drastically change your exposure. So if you're using the camera in this way in midday, it's a very easy way to allow you to focus on getting good images and getting good compositions and allow the camera to do with the majority of the heavy lifting with you making a couple of choices. Now, this isn't the best way to do it. If you were able to shoot in manual and you understand that, then don't worry about all of this, shoot in manual. When we're At low light or golden hour, we actually do switch to manual. Here, so we switch to manual. We set our shutter to 1/125th. We set our aperture over to f2.8, and then we're actually riding the ISO. If we don't have auto ISO, we ride between 2, 4, and 6400, depending on your camera. And if we do have auto ISO, we put it on auto ISO and we kind of cap it around 6400 or 8000, depending on your camera. And that's going to allow the camera to help you make, again, that auto ISO will help you make some decisions so that the camera can do a lot of the heavy lifting and you can focus on composition. These are not guaranteed to get you perfect results out of the camera. They're guaranteed to get you good results for editing if you're shooting raw, like we set the camera for. So when you come back and do your edits in Lightroom, you will have a good starting point. Okay. Indoor configuration settings for general lighting. We're now moving out of that. We're moving to shutter priority. Think about being in a reception hall or a banquet hall or something, and it's not quite dark yet. Well, this is why we're at shutter priority, because we're moving inside, and we need to make sure that our shutter doesn't drag too long to cause, well, motion blur. So setting it to shutter priority allows us to choose 1/125th on our camera. And when we choose 1/125th, with ISO Auto or ISO 1000. We start at ISO 1000 indoors all the time at f2.8, whatever our widest is, f2.8, f1.8, f4, whatever we're using. And then we allow the camera to make some choices. If we see that we're too dark, we adjust with our exposure compensation. If we see that we're too dark, we can also adjust by moving our ISO up if we have manual ISO, or setting the automatic ISO settings. So again, the idea is to make sure that when people are moving around inside, that we're not photographing and getting blurry motion. That could be okay as an effect that you're looking for maybe during the dance part of the reception and you want to show some trail, you want to do some advanced light work with flash, put on your second curtain sync, strobe up top, have some bounce. That could be cool. But if you need something that makes sure that you get a good image without, that you can edit over here and then not have to worry about, this is a good place to start. And that ISO Auto or 1000 is where we want to be, because as the night gets darker, with my Sony a7 III, I might push it up to 3200. I usually don't like to go above 2500, just for me personally. With Panasonic, I'll go all the way up to 8000. Won't really think twice about it. The S5. You'll have to determine that based on your camera and the camera's characteristics. But the reality is, if you're shooting indoors and you want to have good stuff to edit, shutter priority is a good place to start. If you were in aperture priority, here's what could happen. You could have your wide aperture, but the camera may choose a shutter that's too long, and then all your shots are 1/50th or 1/40th of a second, or 1/30th, depending on how dark the area is. So that means that you could have the potential to have blurry shots. The problem is the back of the camera lies to you, right? Until you get it onto a monitor to look at, and if you got a reference monitor, great. If you don't, that's okay too. It could look a lot sharper on your screen than it actually is. So as you check your screen, your images, you need to always push the zoom button so that you can see 1:1 or close to it, and you'll begin to notice that your images are sharp or are not sharp. Sometimes when you're using a high resolution camera, a regular lens that you use on like a 20, like I've got a 42 megapixel A7R II, and some of my lenses just don't render well on that because it's too sharp for them. There's too much resolution, I should say, for that particular lens. And I want to talk about flash settings real quick before we move on. And after I end up flash settings, we'll check to see if there are any comments so we can answer real quick. When we've got our flash, I would always suggest learning and using manual flash. Just like if you can shoot manual indoors, shoot manual. Don't worry about the automatic settings. But once again, these are all places to begin and how to go, start a base until you can do better, until you've got it on lockdown. What we want to do with our flash is we want to make sure that our flash is turned on. And if we're using a flash that's manual, and if it has high-speed sync, which is great, you want to connect the cable or make sure that it's on the camera. But if not, in this instance, you actually want to push the little high-speed sync button to turn it on. Especially when you're outdoors shooting in the bright light, because flash during the day will get rid of the raccoon eyes, but it will do it Well, by limiting the exposure of the flash, it will take a one full pop and bring it down to a quarter pop because it's trying to strobe so quickly. And it might strobe several times depending on the environment. But when you're indoors at nighttime or something along those lines, it won't matter so much. But what will matter when you're indoors or in the dark is that you set your flash to second curtain sync, or else you will have a possible blur that is in front of the moving object, right? Because it flashes at the opening of the shutter, which gives a brighter part of the image in a strange way forward of the image, literally in front of the image, rather than behind. So if you did have any motion blur, it would make it look even more strange. So set to second curtain sync. Also, we talk about how to use your flash power. The flash power on here needs to be adjusted with the flash off, believe it or not, because the camera will most likely attempt to give you a simulated image of what the flash might do. So it's giving you a simulated flash preview. So you need to actually set the camera with the flash off, right? So that you can see the real preview that you're getting. And then when you turn the flash on, you may notice that your image brightens, right? And if it does, that's part of that image preview, that flash preview that it's giving you. They're never correct. Don't ever go by them because you will be sorely upset in the end. But once you've got that there, when you take a couple test shots, you'll be able to determine should you adjust your flash up or down. And if anything else, you can lock your flash so that it won't change on you while you're running around if you need to. If you're worried about the flash settings changing and for some reason you don't want them to change, you can do that. All right. Let's move over to a question real quick. If we've got one, we're moving right on over. Bobby's asking here real quick, how do you know which lenses to use? Bobby, that's a great question. Okay, lenses are all up to you. But if you don't have a great lens, so to speak, don't worry about it. Your kit lens on a full frame camera of f3.5 to 5.6 is better than most f4 lenses on an APS-C camera. It's got a crop, so an f4 lens, a constant f4 lens on an APS-C camera is more like a f5.6 or f6 on a full frame camera. What that means is that you don't have to worry about your kit lens not doing the job. If that's what you've got and that's what you're working with and you're charging accordingly, whatever that is, well, you're going to be good to go, okay? But if you have the opportunity, I'd pick up a 50 millimeter lens, a 50 millimeter f1.8. You shoot a whole wedding with a 50. It'll be tight in some spaces, but you could do a great job and it'll give you the background blur that you want. And then when you're ready to move up, something like a 24 to 70 is really a staple for a wedding photographer in an f2.8. But given the opportunity, I'd go with a 24 to 105 f4 because of the zoom and macro capability over a 24 to 70 f2.8. When you're talking about Tamron for Sony, they've got a 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8. That'll do it. Just as soon as I pick one up, that'll be that. So, Bobby, I hope that was helpful for you. Whew. 23 minutes into this, and we're now moving to the shooting instructions, okay? We got a couple of different ones, right? The shooting instructions for the wedding and for the portraits, and then some focus area modes so that you need to know about. For the wedding, you need to always check your shot list, okay? We'll talk about that later. Check your shot list. Mark your shot list. It's on the back. Take test shots in your different areas to confirm that your lighting is correct. Remember, we're talking about this from the idea of a beginner. So if you aren't choosing to look at your shots after you take them, man, you're going to have a hard time. And you need to look at them like we talked about by punching in and looking to check the focus, critical focus. We're going to make adjustments as needed to our exposure compensation, right? Don't forget, you've got a little EC wheel over here, exposure compensation wheel. Each camera is a little different. Some you have to push a button. Some you have to push a wheel on the back. It just depends. But you want to check your exposure compensation so that you don't knock it. You should always set it back to 0 after you've made an adjustment. You're photographing somewhere and then you set it back to 0. If it's too dark and you keep adding light to it, then that means you need to change something with your auto ISO settings or move your ISO up or change your aperture or your shutter speed, whatever. But you should usually be able to use your exposure control only when you need it for specific situations. Earlier, we talked about having the sun behind us and photographing that way, but then turning this way where the sun's in front of us if we had to, like at the beach. If that was the case, that's a great time you might use exposure compensation to brighten the image up so that the shadow area, which is caused by the backlit subject, is able to be seen. If you're using a modern camera, there can't be any real camera to choose from. It's whatever camera you want to use. Any modern camera is going to do a good job. Most of them will have more than enough dynamic range when shooting RAW to recover quite a bit of detail. So don't worry about that. And remember that you want to make manual ISO adjustments when you need to. If you hit a brick wall and things aren't working, you can always put the camera in program. So the camera, again, remember, your goal is to get images that you can edit here. And if you miss those images while you're photographing, you'll never have them to edit here. So the worst thing that happens, you have a complete kerfluffle, put it on program P, and just let the camera do the job until you can figure it out. But before that happens, look at your ISO, 100, 1000, 4000. Look at them in those jumps, something close to it, and that will help you get squared away. The reason is because 100 is usually the base ISO, 1000 is usually kind of in the middle, 4000 is usually when you start clipping out the gain and a lot, or you're getting really, really, really bright ISO, not necessarily clipping the gain. But as you remember that, you can remember that dark is like dark. Nighttime is like ISO 4000. Think of film, 3200 speed, black and white film, Delta, right? It's dark, right? So dark, 3200, 4000 is the dark, 100 is bright midday. And then, of course, 1000, that's kind of like average, Portraits. This is important. All of this has to do with the shots on the back of the photographer reference guide, but portraits, you want to make sure that you check again. It says to check again the portrait list right here, okay? And as you're checking the portrait list, you want to make sure that you're looking at the images again. I've got it on here twice in two separate reasons because so many people forget to check their images. You've got to know what you're getting, and you've got to look at your images and go through here and make sure that you're getting the images that you're supposed to be getting based on your conversations with the bride and groom. So we check them again. And then when we're doing portraits, I'm talking about specifically the formal portraits after the wedding ceremony. We want to do 3 different compositions of each portrait that you do. So you've got a bride, you got full length, waist up in detail, right? There's 3 of one person. So if you've got a bride and a groom, there are 6 shots between the two of them. And then if you've got them together, there's 9 shots. And that's only if you were doing, like full length and stuff like that. So when you think about like love story photography, when you do that romantic photography with your bride and groom, those are probably 10 to 12 different shots that you're going to have 3 versions of each. So 12 times 3 is 36. So you got 36 shots right there. That ensures you're going to have interesting shots on the different focal ranges in order to get something that looks nice. And when you're photographing the bride and groom or the wedding, the family at the wedding, for the family portraits, the formal portraits, it'll ensure that you've got some nice shots there. All right. As we continue, check again. Focus area modes. Oh, you like that? It jumps, right? Focus area modes. This is very important. Focus area modes are so important, guys. Here's what it comes down to. I've got 3, wide, zone, and flexible spot. Those are what Sony calls them. Wide is like your area. Zone is like different parts in the screen where you can move your focusing spot. It's kind of big, but it takes up one of 9 sections in the screen. And then expanded flexible spot, which is like pinpoint plus a little bit of area around it. Here's the deal. There are so many advanced focusing features out there on your cameras that will help you get good face and eye detect, smile detect, autofocus. You got to learn how to use them, right? You have to know when to use them. Also, the camera's working harder when it's in wider autofocus modes. Like the Panasonic right here does great with its continuous tracking, specifically in its wide continuous tracking with face and eye detect. It'll detect 10 people faces and 5 animal faces all at one time, and you can cycle through them. But as the light goes down, that doesn't work as well. So you have to know how to move into different autofocus modes. Also, when there's lots of people, like in wide, when there's lots of people and lots of action, the camera doesn't know what you really want to focus on. But the Sony has priority faces. You can register a face, so it'll constantly focus on that face first. And you can register 8 priority faces that it'll focus on first before it focuses on anything else. Now, this is the 6500 with the 18 to 105 f4, which is really like a 24 to 155, 150 something, 130 f6 on full frame. But they all work the same. Sony's got the smile detect and the face registration, and you can do that too. But when the wide area of autofocus and tracking, all while in continuous autofocus mode, not single, continuous, when that fails, you need to move to a different focusing mode. So we'd go from wide to zone, right? Or wide to one area plus on Panasonic, right? And that will tell the camera to stop focusing on so many things and just focus in a specific area looking for faces and eyes or registered faces. Okay, when that doesn't work and you're not getting what you want, you need to move to pinpoint or expanded flexible spot. Once again, pinpoint on the Panasonic, expanded flexible spot. When it all fails and none of it works, go to single point autofocus, focus and recompose. Focus and recompose. Put your center point, autofocus point on the face, push the focus button, let go of it, recompose, take the picture. That's what you have to do. And if all of that fails, then you need to go to manual focus. I manual focus quite a bit in very low light, especially with fast moving subjects or things like that with the Panasonic. I really don't have any kind of focusing issues at all with the Sony, to be quite honest with you. The phase detect autofocus is huge here. Panasonic has a different focusing mechanism. So now that we've talked about all those different reasons that you'd focus, it's time to move into our image composition standards. And we're going to talk about that after we answer a question. Well, hello, Joan. Welcome. Thanks, and I hope that you enjoy this. Yeah, you like it? I see we got a question from Joan. Joan's asking real quick. Wants to know if there's a camera that's better than another camera, and should I worry about the camera that I'm using? And that's a good question. We're going to answer that right now. So, Joan, the reality is the camera that you use only matters to you, but it kind of matters to the people around you because they're going to look at you, and there can be some judgment from who's out there. Number one thing that I like to do when I'm photographing is make sure you've got a camera or you get a camera that you can put a grip on. It's going to serve you two purposes. Number one, it's going to make the camera last longer for its battery power, right? No matter what camera it is, it's going to give you more battery power. It's going to give you a bigger grip. Number two, it's going to give you a different look as well. The minute that you put a flash, right? Let's just do this. I'll help you out here. The minute that you put a flash and a battery grip on a camera, it changes the look completely. So here we have a Panasonic S5 with a 24 to 105. Let's say you got a nice lens, right, and this is where you are. This is a good combination. It's going to work great, but people around you will look and notice that the camera, although it looks different, their general understanding, your guests will automatically think bigger is better. So if you're using something like an M50 Mark II, which you can't put a battery grip on, and it's a tiny little camera, or an SL1 by Canon, or a 3500 or 3700 or whatever they got by Nikon, you're already at a disadvantage. Not because those cameras are not capable. They do definitely lack features compared to cameras like these. But even if you're doing something like the A6400 by Sony, those cameras are small, and the 6400 doesn't lack any features, not so to speak, except for image stabilization, steady shot. But that's a different story. The point that I'm making is the people watching you work may notice that you seem under-geared compared to what they expect. Now, this is only important if that type of thing matters to you, because your confidence while you're working, Joan, as a photographer is important. Therefore, immediately putting a battery grip on your camera changes the look. And usually you can have a Mikey grip for about $60. So for about $60, you can add extra capacity to it, and the camera gets bigger. Bigger camera generally means people expect a larger camera for something like this. They already think that as a wedding photographer, you're getting paid $1 billion and that you're some kind of this. So or at least most of them do, right? They think this is what you do, and they're going to have a lot of questions. And so if this helps your confidence, it serves two purposes then, because it also gives you additional battery life. And then by the time you put a flash on top of it, you've really built out a respectable rig for what it is that you're doing. And you can pick up a flash for $60. So for $60 on the grip and $60 on a flash, you could have a unit that's ready to go for $120 plus whatever your camera costs. So no, the camera doesn't really matter. Some cameras will give you more features to help you complete your job, but the reality is you're going to be working in front of people, and as a rock star, you need to feel good about what you're doing. So there is nothing wrong, and it is totally cool to buy gear that you like, that you're excited about, and that looks good and that looks professional. And it doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be justifiable for you. So Joan, thanks for that question. Really appreciate it. Okay, we're moving on to the image composition standards, and we're going over our 30-minute section right now, but that's okay, because we're getting close to the end of it. We got two more parts to go over, guys. Just our photos, which will also be a timeline, and then our image composition standards. Real quick, this is a primer. Listen, learning how to pose people is tough, my friends. It's tough. It's really tough. So when we talk about all of that, we've got to talk about, let's get all of the portraits out of the way and the posing out of the way. What do you need to do at the minimum to be able to have something good in Lightroom to deliver? And here's what it is. You have to understand full length and 3/4 portraits. Okay. Well, I got one more. You need to understand full length, 3/4, and portraits. Full length, when you think about an image, full length doesn't matter if it's in landscape or portrait orientation. It means that the bride and groom or whomever's there is going to have a little bit of room at the top and a little bit of room at the bottom, and it's going to be centered. We're talking portraits right now, right? Portraits. Now, if you wish to do some kind of other portrait or something like that, like something more moody, you want to lean on something, that's great. But if you're just on a beach and the background is just the beach and the water, we got to think. When you're doing a full length, there should be an equal amount of picture on the top and an equal amount of picture under the feet. And the subject should pretty much fill the frame. We should also talk about portraits should have no more than 2 people in them at once or the other. The reason is because, well, this isn't exactly a good example, but when you get 2 people standing comfortably side by side, when you add a third, the amount of space in a 3x2 image changes, right? Because you're making it wider and it's not going taller. And then you have to step back more or the people feel squished. So it can feel like a squished area to try to put 3 or 4 people in a portrait orientation photograph. So I always suggest and teach 2 people or less, so individuals and couples, right? The minute we've got 3 or 4 people, we take that portrait orientation photo and we turn it into landscape. Now we can work our 3/4 as well as our detail. In fact, we can work our 3/4 in detail in either portrait orientation or landscape orientation. The concept is what's in there. This picture in the back right over here that you can see, a little bit of room up top, no room down at the bottom, right at the knees. This is our 3/4, right? There's 2 people in that shot, okay? I'm not even going to look for any more right now. It'd take too much time. When we switch over to landscape, right, from portrait to landscape, we're doing it when we have 3 or more people. And we're going to stop taking as many full-length shots, right, until we have the wider number of people. So with 1 or 2 people or 3 or 4 people, we're taking shots that are 3/4 or portrait, which would be belly button up, closer shots. 3/4 is a knee up, so 2 or 3 people, 3 or 4 people like that. By the time that we get over to a group shot, that's when it's full length, because there might be 15, 20, 30, 50 people in the shot. We've backed out far enough. There's a little bit of room on top, the full length of the people, a little bit of room on the bottom, and then enough room on the sides. Always shoot a little bit wider than you think you will need. That way, if you have to crop and adjust your rotation, you'll have that in there to work with. So full length, space on the top and the bottom of the screen. 3/4 from the knees up, just a little bit of space over the head, and the knees at the bottom of the screen. And portrait from the belly button up or closer with a little bit of space over the head. This is great for a detail shot too. And when we think about that, our wide shots are best in landscape orientation with 10 or more people. Our full length are usually leaves a little bit of room top and bottom and can be portrait or landscape depending on what we're doing. And our 3 quarters are going to give us just a little bit of that space above the head in order to get those shots. And that's the type of shots that we're going to do with all the family members. For men, hands in the pockets, thumbs out, or fingers out. Thumb and hands in the pockets make the hands, thumb and fingers in the pockets make the hands disappear at the wrist. It looks funny. Crossed arms for dudes, but not crossed arms with the fingers under. Definitely crossed arm with the fingers over. Looks good. Smile. Tell them a joke. Make them laugh. Never tell them to smile. They won't. 1, 2, 3 is the way to do it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 3. And then hand over hand. You got one hand over the other, left over right, right over left. It's a great way to be. So real formal, hand over hand. Relaxed, hand in the pocket. Chilling back on the block, arms crossed. Those kind of things. That works for your group shots, your individual shots, your dual shots. For our ladies, holding the bouquet, right? We got our bouquet. She can hold it here. You could imagine there's a bouquet. Shoot, I don't have a bouquet, but pretend this is a bouquet. She can hold it like that. She can hold it like this. She can put it on her waist. She can do that, right? That all works. The beauty smile, side smile, hand on the face or hand behind by the jaw, right? And the hair shot, okay? The hair, the side profile, elbow out. Problem with elbow out is bat wings right there, so elbow forwards. Never out, never behind, forwards and down a little bit. There you go. We always want to create an S curve with our ladies, and we want to create almost a V with our dudes. So try to position them so that the ladies' bodies, either the elbow or the hips, create a little S, and for the dudes, try to position them so that their shoulders are broad compared to our ladies. All right. Sounds pretty good. Okay, we're going to move into our next part right now. That is the actual photographer's reference guide. We've been through the entire back of the sheet. We're just a few minutes behind that 30-minute mark, so we're going to keep going and finish it up right now. This will be pretty simple, totally simple right here, okay? This is the shot list, okay? Now, the shot list is actually a timeline. It's a secret timeline, okay? Because it's broken up into about 5 different parts, right? And those 5 different parts allow you to very easily write times in beside them. So check it out and check it up. The first one is pre-wedding bride. The second one is pre-wedding groom. The next title that we have is the wedding photography at the church or the venue. The next one is the formal photography, and it's broken up into 2 sections, a blue section and a gold section. The blue is really wedding party related, and the gold is family. You work blue to gold unless there's a reason to do otherwise. Because if you do the family first and you miss that 6th shot of the bride and groom on the beach because they wanted to be the family to go first, right? Then you have none of your love story photos with the bride and groom. Let me tell you, that is a problem. You can always photograph your family at the venue. You cannot photograph your bride back at the beach because the sun, the light, the time, it's gone. And then we have our reception and additional shots right down here. Okay, so up top, of course, we've got some info. Let's go over it. The wedding shots at the location, what we would do before we do that, what we would do is when we sit down with our bride and groom, we would actually write the timeline down starting at the wedding time. So if the wedding is supposed to be 6 o'clock, 1800 hours, and we're booked for 6 hours of photography, let's say, we would find out how long do they plan to party. Well, they're going to party from 6 to 11, okay? Well, from 5 to 11, 7 to 11, excuse me. So we've got 1800 would be the time for the wedding. 1900 would be the time for the reception to begin, and the in-between time after the wedding, but before the reception, would be the cocktail hour. This always changes, trust me. It's always not what you expect it to be. So if this was the case and it was working out that way, we'd begin our wedding at 1800. We'd begin our reception around 1900, and then we would go from 7 to 11. That's 4 hours plus the 1 hour. That's 5 hours. That would mean we'd have 1 hour preparation shots that we would do. So instead of starting at 1800, we'd start at 1700, 5 o'clock. This is how I also sell my services. I talked with them. I'm like, hey, 1 hour of prep shots. You want me the hair and makeup? The time doesn't work. We need more time. I can't be there at noon for this, that, and the other if you're not doing it. Brides and grooms will always ask you, hey, well, why don't you come at noon for 30 minutes and then come back? The answer is my time runs continuous, right? It doesn't start and stop. There's There's a lot of reasons for this. You don't want to get to a point of taking your 5 hours and then dicing it up over 15 hours. That's not the way it works. You're going to lose money, and it's going to be very frustrating. If that's the way you've been doing it, just consider charging one time from start to finish, begin to end. Okay? So once we have all that said and done, this timeline right here, we'll be able to see what we're doing. And then we can look and say, out of all my signature shots here, really they only wanted like 15 of them, or whatever that is. Actually, it's more like 7 or 8 of these shots because of what they were doing. So I know that that's only going to take about 30 minutes. So we got things like your detail shot of the shoes, the bouquet, the garter, the close-up shot, the wedding rings, things like that we're going to do before the bride puts them on and make those dressings and drapings. We know that we're going to do our bride as she's getting ready, her hair and her makeup, her this and her that. We know that we're going to get some mirror shots or some window shots, and all of those are written down right there. These are for you to specifically check off. Do them. If you follow this list, you will end up having a book of work that is consistent from wedding to wedding, right? So you can tell complete stories. Same thing with the groom. There's far fewer photos with the groom. It's really easy. Cufflinks, tie, hands on the back, hands on the shoulders, shaking hands, putting the jacket on, shoes, socks. I mean, it's real simple. Watch. Same kind of thing with some of the accoutrement, but that's it. By the time we get to the wedding location at the venue, the actual wedding photography itself is reminding you to get the waist level shot, the low level shot, the eye level shot from the back as the bride walks down, the flower girls, all of those different shots. It also reminds you to get the parents, looking back, depending on where you are and what you can. I have no qualms going anywhere I want to go. I use a 70-200, but I also get in for a close-up shot when they're doing the rings. And I just work with whatever other videographer, or if I'm doing the videography. As long as I can get there, I get there. My method is ask forgiveness later, do it first, because it's just the way it is. If there's a more formalized wedding in a church, you have a lot less flexibility. Obviously, you don't go up there with the minister or the pastor of the church. But if it's a wedding on a beach or in a park or something like that, you will have some more flexibility. So be smart about how you do it. But check the list, make sure you're getting those shots, and prepare for it. By the time we get to our family shots, the only exception to blue than gold is I do include, since everyone's there, one group shot of everybody at the beginning. Now, this is great. I do a lot of my weddings outdoors, so this may not apply to you completely. But when you do, you have to tell them, rally, 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 everybody over here. You line them up in lines, and you stand on a chair, and you take the shot with a wide-angle lens. It's that simple. It takes 10 minutes to set up, sometimes 15, and it can be a problem. After that, you have to tell them to go. They got to get gone. Parents got to go, because you got to work with the bridal party, and that's everything from the complete wedding party, several different versions, the bride full length, the bride waist up, 2 or 3 different versions, the groom full length, groom waist up, the individuals of the bride and groom. So after I get that first shot of the group, I send all the people away, and I tell the bridal party to stay where they are. I then recompose them so they look nice, and I take their full shot of the bridal party. If we got any little sweethearts, little ring bearers and flower girls, I pull them back up and take their shots too, and then send them away to get them with and without. And then at that point in time, after I've got everybody standing up there, I tell them to stay where they are. And I start with the brides or the bridesmaids, and I work the furthest bridesmaid, and I have her step to the left, which is her right, my left. And she steps away, and I take a picture or 2. And I do that all the way down, so I have individuals of everybody in the entire wedding group from the very beginning. So now my bases are covered. If nothing else, if everything goes wrong, by doing it that way, I have guaranteed to get a full length, a 3/4, and a portrait shot of the bride and groom, and the groom. So I do individual, get to individual bride and groom, individual groom, and then keep going. So even if for some reason I don't get to do my love story photos there on the beach or wherever I'm at, I still have the bride individual, the bride and groom, and the groom. Trust me, it will save your bacon. And then we continue on down, and it remembers there are a couple of shots down here at the bottom that if you have to skip, you can get later at the reception. Those are the detail shots of the ring and the bouquet and stuff like that. Then it goes to your family shots. Once again, you can get them on the location or back at the venue. Always bring a backdrop, or have a area that looks nice selected for your backdrop. Let me show you. Hold on. Bingo. I know you can't really see it. Right here, this is an area on the stage where I set up the lights, and we've got some lights in the back. This is beautiful blue and purple lights in the background, and it's just there as an extra spot for me to take photos in the event that I need it. And I use it all the time when I go someplace. I always set up some lights on a white wall or a scrim wall or a curtain wall. I set up some lights, put the lights on it. The brides and grooms, they'll go over there, and their people will take pictures on their cell phone. But for me, I've always got a wall that's got something pretty on it. And I know you can't really see it right here. It's too bad. Maybe you can see that one a little bit better. In any event, we go through that, and then we get to the reception. Now, the reception, it's real simple. You've got usually tightens down, loosens up, and you've got more opportunity to relax, get together. But this is the first time that you will have to go back over all of your images on the in-between. So there'll be a few minutes here where you can go back over all of them, and what you're looking for at this point is detail shots. If you missed any detail shots here or at the reception or the wedding or the formal shots, if you missed getting a picture of the cake table, this is where you do it now. If you didn't get it ahead of time because they didn't have you there earlier or the venue was in another location, this is where you get pictures of the rings put on the ring boxes. You have them take their rings off if you need to. You put them in the bouquet. This is where you go back and get your detail shots. If there's a memorial table, this is now. You've been checking the list. Every time you've gone to a new evolution, you've been checking the list, but now is when you're going back through your images to make sure you got what you need. And you just have a good time for the rest of the night. That is it. That is the photographer's reference guide right here. It is available for you free for download. I hope that you find it helpful. Please let me leave your comments or leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think about all of this. I've had a couple comments come through. Thank you for participating. I really appreciate it. If you got through this and you found this helpful, please like and subscribe and use the Amazon links down below. If you really thought I did a good job for you and you found out something that was very helpful, go ahead and send me a cup of coffee through PayPal, something like that. I truly appreciate it. And as always, that's pretty much it, friends. We've had a pretty good time today. We're going to send it out right now on this little live stream and let you know I want to thank you for watching so much and remind you that I'll catch you guys on the flip side.